and welcome to the next tour with
Ian.
and Andia. Thanks for joining us today. We're super excited to be here to record episode 13. This one is Transition and the Unexpected Separation. And we are here with my very good friend, Melissa Comeau, who we just realized we've known each other for 8 years, which seems like a long time, but also like not long enough. Or we've known each other longer. I feel like so Melissa's spouse served for 13 years in the Marine Corps and then separated in June of 2013 as an E6. And Melissa currently serves as American Red Cross Service to the Armed Forces Director of Military and Veteran Caregiver Network, which I just want to heart the fact that you do this great work. So thank you for being here. I love it when we get to have a close friend on to talk to them about, the wonderful things you do in the community. So, Melissa, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be guest number 13 on this wonderful podcast talking about the unexpected, because I feel like I'm kind of an expert in the unexpected.
I love that. And yeah, we've all learned to kind of roll with that, but I think you definitely are the expert, and that is why we wanted to have you on the show. So thanks for joining us. Lucky 13. Here we go. So how did this separation affect you, and what helped you and your spouse get through the transition? So this is really your opportunity to kind of tell your story, how that all came to be.
Absolutely. Well, I was probably the worst military spouse ever. We never lived on base. I always had a very kind of separate life from the military. We had our son. I worked. We didn't have that. When you think of the traditional military spouse, I just don't feel like I fit in that category. And then that all changed rather rapidly when my husband was transferred to the Wounded Warrior Battalion. And so when you get transferred there, this is after 4 deployments, countless moves. And now we're in this, or he's in the Wounded Warrior Battalion. And a lot of realizations are coming up. I'm trying to learn, on base, I'm trying to learn different acronyms, all of that. But it came down to, after 2 years at the Wounded Warrior Battalion, that he was going to be medically retired. And that word retired seems so strange, because at this time he only had about 11 years of service. 11 years of service when we started the process. And in those 2 years of being at Balboa, being on Camp Pendleton, he did a inpatient at Oasis down in Point Loma. It was a lot of travel, a lot of learning, a lot of uncertainty on whether or not he was going to be able to stay, or if it was ultimately going to end in a medical retirement. So for 2 years, you kind of hold your breath, like, what's it going to be? How's this going to go? And most of the time, I wasn't really thinking about that, because I just wanted to make sure he was okay. And our son was okay. And trying to plan for all those unknowns, like really rolling with uncertain schedules, with different diagnosis, with if this treatment might be working, what this test result will show, all of that. And then it rolled down to, nope, it's going to be a medical retirement. And then you don't control the timeline of that, because there's a bunch of stuff on the DoD side. And then because he was going to be medically retired, we really did get the benefit of the support from DoD to VA, which we hear a lot from other caregivers or other people that have gone through sort of a medical separation, that they didn't necessarily have that kind of backdoor soft transfer from DoD to VA. And so I always say that we were incredibly lucky that our team at Wounded Warrior Battalion were so great working with our team at VA to make sure his healthcare was seamless going from one to the other.
Right.
And because it was a lot, right? You have 2 years and you're being taken care of in one system. And there are, his medical record is a tower of paperwork. And when they were like, oh, would you like a copy before he exits? I'm like, oh, yes, please. And they're like, you might need to come back. It'll probably take 4 hours to print this. It was massive.
Wow.
And you got to have a paper copy, right? Because you never know where your electronic health record is going to go. And you want to make sure you can, have a record of everything that he's done, all the treatments, all the medications, all the different areas he served in, because that comes into play with toxic exposures and things. So a lot of I would say, paperwork, a lot of uncertain timelines, and all the while just really care and concern for someone who's going through a lot medically.
Yeah,
Right. Not to mention all the day-to-day like life that happens
Oh, yeah.
during those 2 years, right? Because you still have like a normal life to live during
Right.
all of that transition and upheaval.
absolutely. And thanks for sharing your story on that. I mean, it was obviously unexpected. And even though you had, roughly 2 years to get from, that point until the medical retirement and that transition piece, can you talk a little bit and unpack just a touch on, the just kind of that unexpected news, like all of a sudden, hey, Wounded Warrior Battalion, here you are. And how do you prepare for that? How do you really kind of wrap your mind around all of that coming to you all at once and just having to face the inevitable? We don't know when that finish line is going to be here and when we're going to cross it. How do you prepare yourself for that?
Oh, well, military life prepares you for a lot of uncertainty. I always try to help people lead into it's okay not to have all the details, and ultimately a belief that everything is figure outable. I know that's a weird word, but I do believe that. I think everything is figure outable. Um, I when I met my husband, he was already in the Marine Corps. I think he would still be in the Marine Corps today if he hadn't been injured. Being a Marine was so much of who he was and or is. And I think it was the part that was the hardest for us going through that is, are you going to be able to get back to a place where you're fit for duty, or are you going to be let go? And the uncertainty of that going back and forth was stressful. And then ultimately, they don't really tell you in the nicest way. So after one of his stays in the hospital, he literally got paperwork with a big red stamp on it that said unfit for duty. And we
Yeah.
knew if that had happened, that it would trigger all of the medical retirement things. But that's a horrible thing to tell someone whose whole life has been about duty. And I always say that that was kind of the most gut checking moment of our transition was, I still have the binder with that exact red stamp on it. And, and the mental load of that and um, the realization that it's so final, right? Like, this is it. It's been decided. You have been stamped.
Yeah.
Um, that was the hardest. And so unexpectedly, like again, that came out of, he was going to tons of different doctor's appointments, tons of different therapies in hospitals and specialists and everything. So to come out of that one with, like the final answer is no, you can't continue to serve no matter what you want.
Yeah.
That's where the real uncertainty or really like the lack of control of it all came from.
Mm.
And
Right.
so, um, that was hard for our family to kind of roll with. It was sad, honestly, Ian, if I'm being
Mhm.
honest. It was like, it was sad. It was
Yeah.
hard to see, and it's in red and it's so final. And so, in the midst of all of the medical care, we're dealing with, that pain of, it doesn't matter what we want at this point. It's going to go this direction. And then what do you do? So you lean into your support system, you lean into
Mhm.
other people you've served with. You try to talk to people who have had this big red stamp before as well. And you just go, everything's figure outable. We're going to figure this out. And we don't control the timeline. That's another interesting piece. And we have a 3-year-old son at the moment who needs a lot
Mhm.
of time and attention too. But we're going to figure it out, and we're just going to take it one day at a time, one step at a time.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of pull that thread a little bit, and we're going to go out of order on how we had planned our questions. But I think you really are leaning into what I wanted to ask you next is talking about those kinds of resources and the tips and tricks and tools and places and just kind of, those sorts of things. Where do you really start to figure that out and map out how you get there? What worked for you, and what are some things maybe that you've come across since, particularly in your current role, that really would help somebody in that position that's facing the unexpected at this point when they
Right.
have planned, to potentially make this a career and have it so much as part of their identity and just kind of have it ripped away through, here's your scarlet letter, bro. Go,
Right.
go
Exactly.
conquer the next world. That's tough.
It was. I would say we really benefited from being at the Wounded Warrior Battalion in Camp Pendleton. They took not just great care of my husband, but also really good care of me and kind of preparing me for what I didn't even ever picture in my life at this age and this time. Um, and so they do a lot of outreach. You have your family readiness coordinator, you have your recovery care coordinator. There were a lot of people really checking in, which was hard for me because I had always been so fiercely independent from the military. I'd always done things on my own. I had my own like network and friends and family outside of the military. But I decided in the process of this 2 years that I was going to learn everything I could and I was going to meet everyone I could and I was going to find out what support was available. At the time, Wounded Warrior Project was there, and they would have groups every now and then, and they give out backpacks to guys in the hospital. But they were talking to me, and they weren't using the word caregiver because I didn't at this time I didn't even call myself a caregiver. That was not the word I would use. I was like, oh, I'm just his wife. It was actually a nurse at Camp Pendleton that first called me caregiver, and I was sitting there waiting for him to come out of something, and they're like, oh, are you Steven's caregiver? And I was like, oh, no, 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 my husband's young. Right. Because in my mind, like caregivers took care of the elderly, right? Like I think when people
Right.
think of caregivers, that's what they think of. They think of our aging population. And so I was like, no, no, no. And she looked at me and I was like, oh, that was probably not the right thing to say. But I was like, oh no, I'm just his wife. And this lady, I will never forget her. I wish I knew her name or if I could even find her again because she just very gently said, you're probably both. Because I was like, oh, I'm just his wife, like, oh, you're probably
Yeah, you're
both.
so much more than that. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's an interesting way that you kind of change the script on what that perspective is.
absolutely. And the resources, Ian. So once I'm like, caregiver, that word stuck, right?
Mhm.
And so like late at night, everyone's in bed. I like get on my computer. I'm like, military caregiver. And it opened up a whole new side of resources and support. Because for the most part, when you go for military spouse support, which is what I was looking for, right? Or people that were talking to me were always in that military spouse vein, right? Like preparing for the next deployment. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, commissary deals. Okay, still need to know when the case sales are, definitely, but not
For
really what
sure.
I'm
Right.
looking for. And just various things about school or employment. And I just like that felt so like that's crazy. I don't have time. I couldn't do any of that. Um, but at the Wounded Warrior Battalion, they also started using that word caregiver, and they would talk about, like this is probably going to be the rest of your life, which I also wasn't quite ready for. I still am not. Um, but the resources that really helped were kind of the along the lines of everything's figure outable, right? Like,
Mhm.
where are you going to live? Okay, well, let's look at these options and let's look at where's great for military support and let's look at where good VA hospitals are and where's your family and where's your network and what are you interested in? Oh, you have some really good work experience. We could help you write really good resumes that could also account for this gap where you're basically a caregiver. How can we, set you up for employment success and talk to you about remote work and opportunities that you might have never thought of before. Um,
Wow.
right?
It's really very like all encompassing.
Yeah. No, and I mean, like and Hire Heroes USA, I'm going to give them a shout out because they helped me write my resume, which ultimately got me this job that I'm in today. Because I was like, oh, I have nothing. Like I have just been crazy these last 2 years. I'm a mom. And they're like, oh no, we're going to write all of this for you. And you have a lot of really good experience. So we'll just write it how we think it will be, most serving for you in the future. Again, everything's figure outable. Just
That's
write you a good
that's
resume.
fantastic. Yeah, and we'll make sure that we link all of these places that you're talking about in the
Yeah.
show notes on the website. So thanks for highlighting those really really cool places and continuing to highlight those for I said it twice highlight for for others that are facing this stuff. So really appreciate
We got to highlight
Yeah.
them.
that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll just do all the highlights.
Well played.
Um, so so thinking about, I mean, you just rolled right into the next question, which is really how your spouse's separation really affected your life and your career. And I think it's pretty obvious where you ended up going down this path. But I think it's the fact that you were probably so good at research at this point, right after those 2 years, and you knew, right? You did basically a lit review of the entire landscape of what could be offered as a caregiver. So you did all this depth of knowledge, and I'm sure that's what brought you to the space that you work in now, where you're not only living this life, but you're also doing it in such a way that you're giving back so much to the community, and you're helping others walk through this same transition with you. So I would love to hear more about, what you do at the Red Cross and how you support other families and caregivers who may not even realize they're in the caregiving space and have come to you for, support and guidance.
Oh, I love this question. And it really is just a super, all the stars aligned, and I got this amazing opportunity. But I mean, I come from a family where we always say we're going to leave a place better than we found it. And one of the things that I really was desperately looking for while we were going through the medical retirement process was other spouses, other caregivers, other family members that were also going through it. And you're kind of isolated even in that situation because your whole life is focused on the care of your loved one, and rightfully so. But there were really lonely times, really isolating times, and times I just wanted a sounding board. Like, am I crazy? Like, this seems like it could be this. And it could be something from like, hey, I'm reading about this and this potential treatment for TBI, or this is like, is this a PTSD symptom? Is this a TBI symptom? Like you just wanted someone to like bounce those ideas off of that wasn't a medical professional, that wasn't in the military, that wasn't really looking at you in any way besides, a peer. And so I was so lucky. I was selected as a fellow for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. And that really took me out of everything I was doing kind of in the Camp Pendleton, San Diego area up to the national stage. And all of a sudden I can advocate for caregiver issues, and I can meet caregivers from all over the country that have similar lived experiences. And I met Dr. Linda Davis, who is still to this day one of my best mentors, best friends in the space. And she was starting a network based off of the peer support model at TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And at the time, they had 20 plus years in evidence-based, best practice, peer support, working with survivors. And her and I talked, and she's like, we need this for caregivers. And she was explaining to me how the grief of caregiving is very similar. I mean, grief is grief. And it's not the same, but there is a lot of loss associated with caregiving, right? There's loss of the military career or your military lifestyle. And as a spouse, you have identity wrapped up in that as well. And losing, what you had thought your future would look like, that's another loss. Losing friends. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't know how to handle big injuries and life-changing injuries. And you lose people, but you gain people. And she said that she wanted to use the evidence-based model of TAPS and change the scope to caregiving. And I was like, oh, I got to get in on this. And at the time, I was just going to help her with an online community, because at this time I had created some networks online and, all the resources and research and all this stuff. And I was like, I would love to have a place to put this, like a one-stop where people could come for a variety of issues, a variety of different relationships, a variety of different locations, and just come together and share what it is to be a caregiver, to have a safe, trusted place to ask questions, to like figure out if you're crazy or not, all kinds of things. And so I was hired at TAPS to run their online community as we were building it for caregivers. And then as things evolve and grow and get bigger, they did research on it. And it was like, okay, well, this is not really the scope of TAP. So where are we going to go? And in 2017, the Red Cross said we would like to serve military and veteran caregivers in the best way possible. And they acquired our program. And I got thrust into the middle of this. And again, having that everything is figureoutable mindset kind of like worked, because we were able to move from TAPS into the Red Cross, which is a huge global organization. And we sit in service to the armed forces. And at the time, we had about 1,200 caregivers that we're serving. And now we're serving almost 13,000. So it has had
Wow.
That's incredible.
exponential growth. we're serving more and more caregivers of all eras, right? So not just, our post 9/11 generation. We have Vietnam, we've had World War II, all different relationships. So parents caring for their service member or veteran, adult children caring for their service member or veteran, siblings, um, and then globally, right? We have caregivers all over the world that are doing this work and just need that kind of safe place to get peer support, to get maybe some self-care, wellness, education and training, and then also to be able to find all the resources that can help you on this, on your journey.
Wow. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's so funny because when anybody ever in my network says caregiver, I'm like, oh, I know where to send you. Oh, I've got this, because you are like the belly button, right? Where like all things come from that. And I think it's so important, the work that you're doing in that space. And I do want to give out a shout out to the VA as well. And with them, changing their mission statement to include caregivers, like what a huge step in the right direction to be giving the spotlight where it's needed, that this is a really holistic community. And as we come together and take care of each other, this is where we should be focusing our energy. So that's an amazing story. I love that.
Oh, it sure is. And huge hats off, to your spouse being a wounded warrior. Now that's incredibly life-changing, as we've talked about. But moreover, I'd like to, give a big shout out again to you, because that really completely transformed and upended, that series of events. Quite frankly, the landscape for now 13,000 caregivers potentially, and what you're doing in that space, it's absolutely mind blowing, the impact that just, one little day can have on the rest of your life. So thanks for what you do today and what you continue to do for future caregivers, because they're going to keep coming,
Right.
and I'm glad that you're so passionate about that space. Tragedy will sometimes lead to a very wonderful silver lining. So thanks for continuing that journey. I love that you're perpetually positive. That's a great sign. You're absolutely the right person for that. And, so kind of maybe on the joyful side of things, I mean, is there anything that you'd like to kind of, add in before we wrap up kind of maybe the, I guess the formal part of this podcast?
No, I mean, I do think my optimism and positivity has played a role in being able to get through all of this. I will say it has not all been rainbows and puppies. And I want to honor that, because sometimes people are like, I cannot be positive today. I cannot put a smile on today. I cannot put one foot in front of the other today. And that's okay. Right. There are so many people that are going to love and support you no matter how you show up. And I think the idea that you could just come as you are and there's support for you, like, don't think you have to be, Susie Sunshine to make it through this, because I have not always been Susie Sunshine. But again, I do think there are some underlying optimism and positivity that have helped me. And I think that I actually learned those. I don't know if I naturally had that. I think they are skills you can learn or cultivate. And again, just saying everything is figureoutable when it all feels so overwhelming and scary and sad and hard. Kind of just making up weird words will get you through.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, figureoutable is positive.
I know. I was just thinking, I feel like we should rename this episode Transition and the Figureoutable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's such a great point. And I think, as you're dealing with things that are coming at you, life is going to throw curveballs at you constantly, right? And it's all about how you deal with those. And yes, we are always, progress, not perfection, right?
Absolutely.
You're moving in the right direction, but there's not, you can't be Susie Sunshine every day. And I love that you gave words to that, because I think it's super important to remember, because where we want to stay positive and be cheerleaders for each other, we're not always going to feel that way.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's not real.
Right.
It isn't.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for keeping it real.
Oh no, you got to call that out. Like, if you're hearing this today and you're like, oh, I don't feel like that at all. Okay.
Yeah.
That's real.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
for
okay.
sure.
Yeah, we get it.
All right.
Yeah.
So speaking of keeping it real, now let's transition into kind of maybe the games part of it. So, we talked about being positive. We talked about, maybe not being positive and figureoutable. I want to ask you to play a little game with me called What's in Your Rucksack. So as you all transitioned out of, your military family life into, where you're at now, we'd like you to kind of talk about two things. One, what would be one of the things that you would bring forward out of that military experience? And what would be one of the things that you'd purposefully leave behind?
Oh, okay. So you talked about silver linings, Ian. I have what I call my silver lining friendships. I
Mm.
absolutely would never have met some of the best people in my life if we hadn't gone through the worst thing in my life. And so I always say what I would bring forward are all those silver lining friends, all of those people that stood by us no matter what, all of those people that we met along the way, and the Marines that, we still continue to be inspired by no matter where their military career took them or their life journey. We just love our Marines. We love our network of people, and those silver lining friends are definitely something I'm keeping in my rucksack forever.
Love it. Love it.
Mm.
All right. So what would you ditch and leave behind?
I would totally ditch the fear of having difficult conversations. So sometimes there are certain subjects, there are certain areas of service, there are tough things you go through, and people are afraid to talk about them. There unfortunately still is a little bit of stigma surrounding some wounds, illness, injuries, disorders. And I would just put all of the fear of those conversations aside because letting people talk, letting people share about the not so great stuff can really lead to better solutions for that family or just give them a chance to be heard and validated. So I am definitely leaving behind the fear of difficult conversations.
Perfect. I love those answers. I think they really resonate with me as well, and kind of some of the things that I struggled with, both in uniform and out. And I love that. Perfect.
Absolutely. That's yeah. I I don't have anything to say. You stated those both so perfectly. That's all I'm going to say about that. um all right, well, I'm going to transition to our next game, which is two truths and a lie, military style. So on our last episode, we had Pat Williams from MOA who spoke to us about resume writing and interviewing, and she was a great guest. So if you haven't caught that episode,
Check it
audience,
out.
check it out. And she actually did the work for us because she actually gave us her two truths and a lie in order. So we actually don't get to guess this time, but I'm going to restate them. So her first truth was she hated the Navy during her first tour. Her second truth was that then she served 35 years and was not ready to leave. And her lie was that the notion that military service is actually suitable for everyone and idealistic. So those were Pat's two truths and a lie. So now on to you, Melissa. We're going to give you the opportunity to give us your three bits of information, let's say, and we will reveal on our next episode what your lie was. So true truths and a lie, military style, to you.
All right. So my first bit of information is that I was able to see the unveiling of the Hope for the Warriors statue honoring combat veterans at Wounded Warrior Battalion West. My second bit of information is that during my husband's military career, we never had to leave the state of California. And my last bit of information is that I was able to see President Barack Obama address the Marines on Camp Pendleton.
Ooh,
Well, they're all West Coast centric.
I know.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll guess. You guessing now?
No, we won't
Yeah.
guess now. We'll guess on the next one.
Right. Sounds
Thank you, Melissa. That was fantastic. We will, of course, reveal which one was the lie on our next episode, which everyone will have to tune in for. And thank you so much for being here today. We heart you, and I love that you're a part of my network and part and a friend. And thank you for all the work that you do in this community.
Absolutely. Melissa, thank you so very much. It's great to see you again. Thanks for joining us all the way from the West Coast. So yeah, folks, please follow us, like us, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We're everywhere. Comment, give us some shout outs and ask us some questions. Nexttourpodcast.com and listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, and we'll see you for the next episode of The Next Tour. Thanks, everybody.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and Andia or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.